It is unclear why he was transferred to the Central New York prison. At one point, one officer yanks him by the neck and drops his semi-conscious body on an examination table.
But I will say, I do find it crazy that this guy can't even escape the paparazzi from prison. The video was likely taken by an inmate on a phone that was smuggled into the prison and then sold to TMZ, and it makes me wonder how much the inmate got paid, because he probably sacrificed his phone in order for the world to see this video.
People saw in that video. And I know that they're trying to keep a different narrative, but if you've seen that video, you're not going to forget that video.
Yeah, no, you're not going to forget that video. He's a person, but what they're saying is the video didn't happen because of a bad freak-off.
I don't think that the jurors are going to be able to separate that video from their mind.
Recently, fresh video from one of the most dangerous federal prisons in the United States has surfaced. It also uncovers far worse details regarding Diddy Combs' existence behind bars than anyone could have predicted. The man, who was formerly well known for private aircraft and platinum singles, doesn't like the ostentatious businessman that fans recall in the released video. The diamond chains and fancy outfits have vanished. In its place are a worn jumpsuit, weary eyes, and the hesitant, wary gait of a person discovering the true meaning of survival. However, this isn't simply another collapse of a star. It's the startling truth of how one of the most influential people in hip-hop went from luxury to imprisonment. From managing empires to battling for breath in a cage made of concrete. In September 2024, a little more than a year ago, Diddy was taken into custody at Miami International Airport after what the police called an escape attempt. Before takeoff, federal authorities surrounded his private jet and arrested him while shocked onlookers recorded the incident on their phones.
Federal agents took Sean Diddy Combs into custody. He's seen in this video entering the Park Hyatt Hotel in Midtown Manhattan with others when agents from Homeland Security Investigations approach and separate him. They place Combs under arrest and lead him out the front door in handcuffs. His lawyer said Combs had come to New York 2 weeks earlier with the intention of turning himself in. He did not expect the agents to be waiting at his hotel
Within hours, he was sent north, not to a posh holding room or a cozy rehabilitation facility, but to Brooklyn's Metropolitan Imprisonment Center, or MDCA facility that federal judges have referred to as barbaric and unfit for human imprisonment. This was the turning point for a man who had once dominated the charts and influenced a whole generation of musicians. This was the downfall of a formerly untouchable guy who went from a $48 million estate with a view of Miami Beach to a cell that was barely large enough to turn around in. Furthermore, the recently released video shows the complete scope of Diddy's life behind bars. Because MDC Brooklyn isn't only a place for punishment, few might have foreseen the nightmare. The Metropolitan Detention Center, a drab gray steel and concrete tower encircled by razor wire, is tucked away in Brooklyn's Sunset Park neighborhood. However, the reality that exists within those walls is so unsettling that even federal officials have begun to refuse to transfer inmates there. MDC Brooklyn was initially intended to house about 1,000 prisoners when it was constructed in the early 1990s. Today, about 1,400 people call it home, a congested labyrinth of confined passageways, fading illumination, and incessant cacophony. Many of the cells have no ventilation and damaged plumbing, and they are stacked like storage lockers. The Federal Bureau of Prisons made a historic decision by September 2024. They completely ceased sending convicted prisoners to MDC. Diddy was brought there even though the organization in charge of managing it essentially acknowledged this place is too broken to function. A man who was once valued hundreds of millions of dollars now resides in one of the nation's most notorious institutions.
I got video of him at Fort Dix reporting for work in the library.
This was the chapel, and this is the media library in the chapel, which is where Diddy's currently working. He's working in a Life Connections program, which is an 18-month program that helps rehab people, get them closer to spirituality, to charity groups, and with that, it will shorten his sentence. It does sound like he used maybe possibly some connections to get a better job.
Has been incarcerated at this same facility. Kelly, Pharma Bro, Martin Shkreli, Sam Bankman-Fried, Ghislaine Maxwell, and even Jeffrey Epstein prior to his move. It's a nasty melting pot of scammers, gang members, and fallen icons, where some of the most infamous cases in the nation come together. For years, federal judges have denounced the location. A judge referred to it as barbarous. Conditions were described by another as being beyond the pale and a breach of fundamental human decency. Scandals abound in the facility's history. Inmates were left chilling in complete darkness during electrical shortages. Inmates have perished while awaiting treatment due to sewage leaks, infestations, and medical incompetence. What insiders have been reporting for years is now supported by fresh video of Diddy's time spent inside those walls. MDC Brooklyn is more than just a jail. It's a contemporary dungeon. It is described by prisoners as hell on earth, a place where optimism wanes daily, the air never seems clean, and the lights never go out. Diddy didn't simply forfeit his freedom, When he came here in late 2024, he entered a world designed to destroy people's bodies and minds. And the latest video shows that he's having to learn that lesson the hard way. The air itself felt different when Diddy first entered MDC Brooklyn. It was colder, heavier, and almost metallic. Steel doors clanged rhythmically, sounding like a warning throughout the hallway. He had nothing under control for the first time in decades. Not his surroundings, not his routine, not even the light in his room. There were no chances taken by the Bureau of Prisons. He was placed in the Special Housing Unit, referred to as the box by other prisoners, within minutes of his admission. For their own security, prominent inmates are sent there. The truth, however, is known to anyone who has been there. Under the appearance of protection, it is solitary imprisonment. For Diddy, that meant spending 23 hours a day in an 8 by 10 foot concrete cage. There was a single gray blanket that had a subtle bleach and hopelessness odor, a steel bunk that was fastened to the wall, and a paper-thin mattress that was no thicker than his laptop. There's only a folded towel and no pillow. He sleeps just inches from the toilet. No matter what, the fluorescent light never goes out. That intense buzzing brightness remains on, bleaching the space in a ghastly glow even when the outside world goes dark. According to prisoners, it causes you to lose your sense of time. Day and night blend into one another. The quiet isn't serene. It's the type that magnifies every breath, pipe leak, and faint cry coming from another cell through the air vents. The best description of it came from a former prisoner. You hear people losing their minds in they converse with ghosts, the walls, and themselves. You feel the pain, even though you can't see them. Through the vents, it crawls. The announcer then mumbles, to the soundtrack of MDC Brooklyn, a low hum of suffering that never stops. Diddy's new life was nothing less than psychological warfare for a man accustomed to bodyguards and opulent pen mansions. Like clockwork, guards barked commands. Every step is linked. Every movement is tracked, and you face the wall with your hands behind your back. Every time he exited the cell, even for a quick medical examination or court appearance, he was escorted in full shackles, handcuffed, shackled at the ankles, and had a chain through his waist. Food arrived through a metal slot in the door, usually barely edible, lukewarm, and flaky. A slice of white bread and a packet of instant oatmeal arrived for breakfast before the sun came up. It could be stale wheat for lunch. Dinner was a scoop of rice or beans that had no flavor. He skipped meals occasionally.
And they say that the conditions are not up to scratch.
Makes it worse is the food. Mostly everything is stale food, is old food that's donated, that they wrap up or they cook for you. It's full of not roaches and the giant cockroaches. You know, you can smell the mold, you can smell the rot, you can smell the jail that it needs to be rebuilt. It needs help. I don't think anyone should be in that particular jail. You're in prison and you're serving time, or you're waiting, to go to court or to go to trial or whatever it is, does not mean that you're not a human being. Just like what's going on with Diddy, he still deserves to be treated as a human.
Communication with his lawyers was restricted to closely controlled meetings through plexiglass, with every word being recorded and every interaction being watched. Legal calls were also prohibited, and visits were prohibited. Later, his legal team asserted that he was being purposefully isolated by the system, which prevented him from preparing his defense. His everyday routine was completely dismantled. The lights were blazing brightly about 6 in the morning. The cell never warmed, but guards yelled, "Roll call" through the doors. It remained at a steady temperature that seeped into his bones. He was allowed to engage in recreation for 1 hour each day, which entailed entering a pen that resembled a cage on the rooftop and was encircled by chain-link fence. The sky was gray and far away, with neither fresh air nor direct sunlight, a remembrance of what it was like to be free. According to later prison records, Diddy remained silent for the first 48 hours and made no calls, requests, or complaints. He was calm but vacant, like someone trying not to think, according to one guard. However, MDC has a way of shattering even the most resilient minds. The fluorescent light that never goes out, the cacophony, the chill. Time itself is consumed by it. Hours seem like minutes. Days are made up of hours. By the second night, fatigue becomes more intense than hunger. When the lights never go off and the walls are always humming, it's difficult to fall asleep, and the whispers continue through the vents. Voices in the distance muttered, shouted, and even sobbed. That's when it dawns on you. This isn't offense. It is a form of psychological punishment, the kind that damages the mind but doesn't leave any bruises. The most terrible fact of all was revealed to the man who was previously renowned for his dominating stages and opulent boardrooms during those first 48 hours. There is no such thing as status in MDC Brooklyn, money, fame, and power. It doesn't shield you from the loneliness, the cold, or the noise. However, what followed demonstrated that this was more than isolation. It was survival. Because before the week was done, Diddy would learn that the scariest danger in MDC wasn't being alone in a cell. Beyond his door, in the darkness, lay the true danger. you must first comprehend the situation Diddy finds himself in order to comprehend what he has gone through while incarcerated. A place so infamous that even senior federal judges have called it a disgrace to the Constitution. The Brooklyn Metropolitan Detention Center has been more than just a prison for many years. It has made headlines, sparked a lawsuit, and served as a warning about what happens when a system breaks down due to its own brutality. In January 2019, the first significant crack appeared. For almost a week, the entire complex was in complete darkness due to a huge power breakdown. Just when New York City was struck by a violent polar vortex, outside temperatures fell to 2°F inside. Prisoners froze in their cells and hammered for assistance through the small windows. No lights, no heat, no hot meals, and no way to communicate. The pictures that surfaced were terrifying. Frosted glass crushed against shadows. On scraps of paper, homemade signs pleaded for water and warmth.
So we're here at MDC. All we hear are the inmates banging on the windows to get our attention. And when they see that we're here, they bang louder. And we're not getting anything from the Bureau of Prisons. They're not telling us anything.
A mother outside the gates yelled, "My son's in there. He hasn't called in days. They're freezing them to death." It took widespread indignation and a $10 million class action lawsuit for the Bureau of Prisons to acknowledge what had happened. Protesters gathered outside in the bitter cold, chanting, "Occupy the streets till they get heat." Scenes from a dystopian nightmare were described in detail in the case. For days, prisoners were kept in completely dark cells with overflowing toilets, no functional showers, and no fresh air. For some, it had been almost a week since they had a hot meal. The building and its occupants had already suffered harm when the lights were eventually turned back on. The horror stories continued to pour in over the following few years. Mold and sewage leaks were reported in several dwelling units by 2023, rats running through hallways, black fungus growing up walls, and terrible food that was delivered every day sometimes, with maggots were all reported by the prisoners. Later, a security told reporters that even employees don't want to dine at the cafeteria. Every square inch of MDC is tainted by the smell of neglect, because there aren't enough correctional officials to keep everything under control. Inmates complain that they are kept in lockdown for days at a time. Physicians come and go. Inmates who are ill wait weeks or even months for medical attention that never comes. MDC was previously deemed unconscionable in a 2016 inspection by the National Association of Women Judges, which found that it had violated both US and UN humane treatment requirements. However, nothing was altered. By 2024, it was hard to overlook the human cost. Between 2023 and 2025, at least 4 prisoners had passed away, some by violence, some by suicide. Uriel White, a young man awaiting trial on gun-related charges, was fatally stabbed by another inmate in June 2024. A brawl broke out in one of the common areas a few weeks later, and Edwin Cotto was beaten. He didn't make it through the night. In a startling incident captured on the facility's security cameras that same summer, a group of MS-13 gang members used improvised knives to attack an inmate 44 times. There were 2 shibs found. Although 9 men were eventually charged, the video brought up more serious issues. How in the world were these weapons entering a federal facility that was meant to be secure?
There was an MS-13 stabbing while I was at Buckingham Correctional Center. And I don't know what the issue was, but they got word from the street that they had to take care of one of their own, that he was out of line. So they hit him up on the yard, they dropped the knife, and they all wandered off. So the guy kind of just like sat out there on the yard, and like we had thought he got jumped because we weren't really paying attention. And then we realized like he's not walking too well, like something's really wrong. He made it all the way up the stairs, made it back to his pod, and just like fell out on the floor and started bleeding out from his gut where he had like stuffed his shirt, so he was like trying to hide in the blood. So they had this big investigation, but they could never prove what happened. And it's really crazy because they had dropped the knife after they stabbed him, so they wouldn't get...
In private, even the guards acknowledged that the violence is a never-ending loop. Lockdowns are common, although they are rarely successful. Hours pass without any monitoring in some regions. Others are so packed that conflicts arise every day, because the atmosphere has turned into an additional kind of punishment. Defense lawyers have started utilizing MDC's conditions as part of their legal tactics to argue for shorter sentences, not out of pity. Even prosecutors, who are often silent on such issues, cease to oppose. One lawyer told the New York Times, "It's not punishment anymore. It's punishment stacked on punishment." They are aware of the reality. MDC is not a building. It is a failure that continues to function. The brutality and the deterioration, however, may not be the most unsettling detail. It's the quiet, official comments regarding the deaths of prisoners are brief, dry, and ambiguous. There was an incident. There is an ongoing investigation. No responsibility, no names. just another life lost in a structure that engulfs people. Citing staffing initiatives and maintenance projects, the Bureau of Prisons maintains that conditions are improving. However, nothing has changed. According to federal public defenders, the mold continues to grow. The cells continue to overflow. The screams are still audible. Additionally, Diddy was placed in solitary confinement for his own safety. The world outside his door was like this. Any noise in the night could be a threat. Every quiet moment could indicate that someone else did not survive until daybreak. The guards were aware that he was a target due to his notoriety. Diddy was a star among desperate guys. Therefore, it was inevitable that someone would assume that injuring him would make them instantly famous. And that time arrived sooner than anyone anticipated as the tension within MDC reached a boiling point. Because the violence that has plagued the institution for years eventually made its way into Diddy's cell one October night, and the hip-hop mogul's life almost ended horribly in a couple of seconds. Diddy has been incarcerated for just over a month by October 2024, long enough to comprehend the cadence of jail life, but not long enough to realize how quickly it can become lethal. It happened at that moment. That was the moment that made all the difference. Diddy's longtime buddy and producer Charlie Finney broke the quiet, admitting that one night inside MDC Brooklyn almost ended in death. According to several accounts, including one from the Daily Mail, a scene straight out of a nightmare was reported by Finney Diddy, sound sleeping on his lonely unit's short steel bunk. Woken by the distinct sense of being watched, he opened his eyes to see another prisoner standing above him. The man held a homemade shiv in his hand, a rudimentary weapon made of sharpened metal, shining in the fluorescent light of the cell. The tycoon who had controlled million-dollar studios and opulent apartments suddenly found himself staring at something that was only inches from his throat. It's difficult to imagine your thoughts during such a moment. It would be absolute dread for most individuals. However, witnesses subsequently claimed that they did not see panic on Diddy's face. There was silence. Even the assailant was perplexed by the stillness. Cameron Lindsay, a former federal warden who commanded operations at the same facility, informed reporters that his life is still in jeopardy at MDC. There's never really a safe place for a man like him. Reports initially differed on what transpired next. Some said that before any blood was spilled, guards stormed the cell and stepped in just in time. Others claimed that an unexpected ally called Raymond Castillo, an inmate who lived in the same housing block, provided assistance. Later, Castillo gave the Daily Mail his version of events, and that rendition depicts what actually happened that evening in the most terrifying way.
So now we're actually living with him. So now we're studying him and idolizing him in person. So, I feel like we all got to recognize with time was that he's human, and he's like one of us. He's one of us, and I feel like he handled himself like with humility.
It all began over something as insignificant as a chair. He said Diddy was using a seat in the tiny common area, and the attacker had insisted that he give it up. Tension built when Diddy declined. Respect, or the appearance of it, is the lifeblood of prison life. And when it is contested, things can quickly get out of hand. The same prisoner reappeared hours after the lights went out. He wasn't searching for a chair this time. He desired authority. With his eyes fixated and his breathing shallow, the man slipped into Diddy's cage. A few seconds that seemed to go on forever ensued. Castillo, who was close by, spotted activity through his own door's little opening and instinctively responded. Shouting, he jumped forward and caught the assailant's wrist as he raised a weapon. Moments passed during the battle before security rushed in and tore them apart. Nobody was slain. Although there was no bloodshed, the message was clearly understood. Then, the unexpected part arrived. Castillo claims that Diddy did not yell. He refrained from using profanity. The surveillance cameras captured a fleeting moment of sympathy as he gazed into the eyes of the man, who had just attempted suicide, and said quietly, "Pray for peace." Later, even the guards who watched the replay said it was surreal, as if he was attempting to utilize empathy to lessen evil. However, that moment also conveyed something else in the hidden language of jail life. You are no longer untouchable. A celebrity's notoriety does not provide safety within those gates. It makes you feel like a target. Attacking a well-known individual like Diddy isn't motivated by personal animosity for many prisoners. It has to do with power. Hurting a renowned person becomes a means of gaining immediate respect in a place where everyone feels helpless. The phrase status by violence is familiar to both guards and prisoners. Later, defense lawyer Brian Steele told the court that his client's celebrity had turned into a problem. Mr. Holmes is an attempt. He claimed that everyone there views him as either a threat or an opportunity. It was referred to as an assassination attempt. Others referred to it as a ritual of intimidation, a means of conveying the idea that even the powerful are vulnerable. In any case, Diddy was deeply shaken by the situation. He realized for the first time since his incarceration that serving time was not the key to surviving in MDC. The goal was to survive long enough to complete the phrase. Whispered from cell to cell like gossip on fire, reports of the attack swiftly proliferated throughout the complex. While some prisoners laughed about it, others were shocked. but the outcome was the same. Once more, Diddy's name was associated with terror rather than fame. However, the occurrence was minimized in the official reports. A brief, impersonal statement was released by the Bureau of Prisons. There was a fight. The matter was settled. No identities, no details, no injuries, nothing more. As usual, the system covered the story, but news spread. TMZ confirmed that the event wasn't merely a rumor by confirming the essential information with their own sources. It was authentic. In the weeks that followed, Diddy's legal team made demands for answers, requesting an expedient move and alleging real dangers to his safety. The entire course of his incarceration was altered by that night inside MDC. Since then, every noise in the corridor seemed menacing, and every shadow on the wall served as a reminder of how near death he had come in a space that was hardly large enough to accommodate his arms. The fear persisted even after the incident was ended. It was more than simply a prison term after that night. It was a battle of the mind. Additionally, Diddy saw each daybreak within MDC as a battle for his life, not whether danger will reappear, but when. The notion of the knife incident inside MDC Brooklyn was quickly dispelled. The outside world heard rumors of the near-fatal incident within days. Through tabloids at first, then mainstream media. What began as rumors swiftly escalated into a major media frenzy. However, one individual was raising the alarm more loudly than anybody else behind the hashtags and headlines. Diddy's defense lawyer is Brian Steele. Only a few weeks after the assault, Steele made direct and weighty remarks in a heated court filing. The life of my client is in jeopardy. Inside MDC Brooklyn, he is not secure. According to Steele, the facility is a place of systematic neglect, brutality, and disorder. Diddy was warned that he was a walking target in a building that was unable to defend him because of his celebrity profile. He pleaded with the court to approve a transfer to a different federal facility, somewhere safer and with operational supervision. However, the motion was refused by the judge. For this reason, the Bureau of Prisons maintained that they could guarantee Mr. Holmes protection while he remained. Furthermore, the remark did not reassure anyone who was aware with MDC's track record. It was policy disguised as denial.
And, he's not going to think solitary confinement, in a prison, let alone one like MDC Brooklyn, which, has been written about extensively, where federal judges have refused to put their clients in there, or at least put the Federal Bureau of Prisons on notice that the place is, infestated with rodents, that there is crime, that there are weapons, that there is drugs, that there's violence, and that it's just a very difficult place.
Reports kept coming out of the facility throughout the course of the following few months. Some came from prisoners, and some from staff. One horrifying story after another of brutality, neglect, and despair. And the courts started paying attention. Several federal courts began subtly accepting defense lawyers. Long-standing claims that the conditions within MDC Brooklyn were so cruel and demeaning that they were now taken into consideration while determining sentences. In other words, even the government had stopped acting as though MDC was secure. One judge stated, "It has become routine to grant reduced sentences based on the conditions of confinement in MDC. Prosecutors no longer object because they know the truth." By early Diddy's case had become a focal point for criticism of the federal prison system as well as the legal system. Investigations were demanded by civil rights organizations. Horror stories from ex-offenders that mirrored Diddy's experience were documented. Assaults are ignored by guards, medical crises are not addressed, and suicides are covered up by paperwork. Almost all of the articles written on the facility used the phrase "hell on earth." Perhaps the most startling news, however, came from Capitol Hill rather than a lawyer. Following numerous allegations regarding life-threatening conditions, former federal prosecutor and New York Congressman Dan Goldman attempted to perform an official examination of MDC Brooklyn in March 2025. As he displayed his credentials at the facility's gates, cameras followed him. They wouldn't let him in. Goldman didn't hold back when reporters questioned why. His tone was piercing, irate, and unadulterated. This is a taxpayer-funded federal building. What precisely are elected officials hiding if they are unable to enter and observe what is going on? Within hours, the video became viral. It was reported nationwide by news outlets. "What are they hiding?" became the catchphrase for both Diddy fans and campaigners.
Local congressional Democrats entered the gate to the Metropolitan Detention Center. A masked agent locked it behind them. He ignored calls to identify himself and then proceeded to lock the front door of the federal jail. It effectively left Congressman Dan Goldman, Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez, and Congressman Adriano Espaillat that are at the front door stuck in a small yard for a period of time.
What we've heard is that the conditions here are incredibly horrendous, but also that people are not gaining access to lawyers.
This is the stuff of authoritarian fascist governments, where they hide people based on fictional reasons and prevent any oversight and accountability.
Anger was growing outside the jail walls. Some were ardent fans, and groups started congregating outside MDC with placards that said, "End the torture and free Diddy, fix the system." Others were ex-offenders who had personal experience of how terrible things could get. They staged vigils at night, sang, and played his old music on loudspeakers. They saw this as more than a single celebrity. It was about bringing to light what had been overlooked for many years. Images of Diddy's fans pushed up against the gates, yelling his name and demanding explanations, were taken by local media. He's famous, so people care. But there are hundreds of people in there whose names we'll never know, and they're living like animals, a protester told NBC News. On certain nights, Diddy apparently heard the faint echoes of the crowd outside, the sound of a world that hadn't forgotten him. The car horns, the muted chants. It was a reminder that freedom was only outside the gates, out of reach. But it was also a bittersweet reminder that people still cared. Steele, meanwhile, kept pushing. He submitted several motions calling for assurances of safety and openness. He asked the Bureau of Prisons to provide an explanation for the attack on a well-known prisoner in an ostensibly guarded facility. Responses from the Bureau were consistently ambiguous, sterile, and rife with bureaucratic jargon. "We are concerned about every prisoner's safety. We're going over internal procedures." Pressure was growing, but nothing ever changed. Cable news panels and morning talk shows were now discussing Diddy's case. Experts in law argued about whether his notoriety was a boon or a detriment. In the background, the Bureau started thinking about its choices. Even prosecutors acknowledged that Diddy's continued employment at MDC was turning into a burden by the summer of 2025. For the institution as a whole, not just for him, the growing number of lawsuits, the public attention, and the curiosity of Congress, it was excessive. The Bureau of Prisons finally took action after a grueling 15 months of seclusion, anxiety, and uncertainty. Diddy was quietly given a move without any publicity or cameras. However, the choice was not one of mercy. It was a tactic. In order to shift the headlines, MDC needed the story to slow down. In order to send him to the Fort Dix Federal Correctional Institution in New Jersey, they packed him up before daybreak, shackled his hands and feet, and put him on a transport van. Diddy briefly believed that this was the end of the tunnel. A fresh setting, a new facility, an opportunity to breathe. However, he was mistaken. Fort Dix was ready to show him that the horror wasn't over, it was only taking on another form. While MDC Brooklyn had been his particular torment, Diddy finally received his transfer after 15 months of uncertainty, dread, and seclusion. However, the headlines and the nightmare were far from done. The morning of October 30th, 2025, started with a sound that seemed almost unreal after 15 months of non-stop work inside MDC Brooklyn. 15 months of solitude, dread, and almost death. Guards yelling his name, feet reverberating on pavement, keys jammed. Transfer day was the only thing that mattered to Diddy. His relocation had finally been approved by the Bureau of Prisons. His attorneys described it as a win, an opportunity to make a fresh start, and a way to exchange a hellhole for optimism.
Have not heard he's actually been transferred from MDC to his choice prison. This is Fort Dix. This is located in New Jersey. This is where he actually wanted to go. However, the judge, Judge Samaranian, was kind of against it. He did not approve it. However, I guess the prison board overruled Judge Samaranian, and Diddy's currently in Fort Dix. Now, what's interesting about this is there are people who have been saying negative things about Combs. You guys already know who I'm talking about. Well, that individual had the audacity to focus on Sean Diddy Combs. This was a fight that he allegedly had while he was in prison, where a knife was allegedly held to his neck. That's what the person is reporting about today. However, breaking news, he just got released. Or, yeah, he got released, you could say that. Got released from MDC, and he's currently in Fort Dix. This is actually great news for Sean Diddy Combs. To be honest, this is kind of like a prison, resort kind of prison. So this is actually a good thing for him. However, we know how people...
However, hope is always accompanied by handcuffs when in federal jail. He was awakened before the sun rose. All of his belongings, including a few books, family letters, and a few personal items, were crammed into a canvas duffel bag bearing his inmate number. There was no ceremony or warning, just the order. Pack up, then the chain around his waist. The shackles and the cuffs appeared. He was guided past the same buzzing fluorescent lights and cracked walls, down the same hallways he had traversed every day. He didn't glance back this time. The sky over Brooklyn was a flat gray outside, the kind that eats up the sun. At the loading pier was a van from the Bureau of Prisons. Windows were blacked out and unmarked. With it, 2 guards climbed in. The Federal Correctional Institution, Fort Dix in New Jersey, is the destination. 50 miles from Philadelphia is a low-security facility. With programming, family visits, and a route to recovery, Fort Dix was meant to be the opposite of MDC. That's what his lawyers thought anyway. However, Fort Dix has a unique past. Less well known, quieter, yet just as eerie. One of the biggest prisons in the nation. This former military installation is now a federal penitentiary with over 4,000 convicts, a location where power structures quickly emerge, reputation is money, and alliances are brittle. Diddy was placed in the Residential Abuse Program, RDAP, an intensive treatment facility for prisoners with drug problems. Upon his arrival, Tenny Geragos and his attorneys have battled for this. They viewed it as a step toward rehabilitation, a controlled setting, counseling, and perhaps a year off his sentence, if it was finished. There were other benefits associated with the placement. Work assignments are common for RDAP offenders, but Diddy's was unique. One of the most sought-after positions in the entire facility, he had been assigned to help in the chapel's media library. It was an almost poetic fall for a man who had once been surrounded by wealth and prominence and was now working in silence. Among faded VHS tapes and rows of religious manuscripts,
Video of him at Fort Dix reporting for work in the library.
This was the chapel, and this is the media library in the chapel, which is where Diddy's currently working. He's working in a Life Connections program, which is an 18-month program that helps rehab people and get them closer to spirituality, to charity groups, and with that, it will shorten his sentence. It does sound like he used maybe possibly some connections to get a better job.
The first leaked video then appeared in early November 2025. Despite being brief less than a minute, the video went viral on the internet. It had Diddy wearing the typical jail khakis inside the chapel library. With a slight smile on his lips, he took off his blue jacket, spoke quietly with another prisoner, put the jacket back on, and headed for the exit. The only sound in the footage was the surveillance camera's shaky hum. For casual viewers, however, it spoke enough. The scene was serene, with a modest man settling into his new life, and at last feeling comfortable. However, the smile appeared forced to those who were familiar with the inner workings of prisons. It appeared to be staged. The video was candidly described by a former Fort Dix prisoner. To avoid giving off the impression of terror, you learn to grin inside. Peace isn't that's how you survive. The Bureau of Prisons was still incensed. Officials from Fort Dix released a statement. This video was not created or approved by us. Investigations were underway on the leak. In private, they said that employees were frantically trying to figure out who had stolen the video. Life inside Fort Dix went on and swiftly started to fall apart while the outside world argued about whether the clip was an indication of strength or capitulation. Rumors of disciplinary infractions appeared within weeks of his transfer. Rumors of alcohol possession, the quintessential contraband controversy, surfaced first. According to inmates, Diddy was found in possession of a tiny amount of Pruno, a homebrew beer made from sugar and fermented fruit. The story was carried by TMZ Judah Angelmeyer. His spokesperson rejected it right away, claiming Diddy was more concerned with rehabilitation than recreation and denouncing the claims as poisonous gossip. However, it didn't stop there. A few days later, there was another report, this time regarding an illegal phone call. It was later verified by prison records. Diddy had violated Bureau of Prisons policy by making a 3-person call. He said he was discussing a public statement for the New York Times with his lawyers. Officials had a different perspective. They charged him with violating communication security, which is punishable by automatic sanctions. The penalty included an internal suggestion to increase his time served by over a month and 90 days without phone or commissary privileges. On November 4th, 2025, his 56th birthday, the decision was filed. Birthdays are celebrations for the majority of individuals. It served as yet another reminder to Diddy that there were repercussions for every decision he made within these confines. That leaked video had appeared innocuous, even promising, to the general public. It was an embarrassment to the Bureau of Prisons, and it became into a curse for Diddy himself. There was a man being watched more intently than ever behind the little smile captured on tape. Every action was examined, every rumor was exaggerated, and every error was made into a new headline. The work at the chapel library, which used to be a peaceful haven, suddenly felt like a spotlight. Although Fort Dix's walls were cleaner than MDC's, the pressure was nonetheless oppressive. According to a former convict, Fort Dix isn't as brutal as Brooklyn. It's more polite about breaking you. The routine, the surveillance, the endless judgment, it was all designed to wear you down slowly, piece by piece, until even your silence could be interpreted as guilt. Additionally, Diddy saw that smile in the released video as a representation of something bigger. A man attempting to convince the world that he was alright while the system was working non-stop to disprove it. However, that brief video, that brief glimpse of Diddy moving down those hallways, struck a truth that nobody was prepared to confront. Because the reality of what was still to come was what the cameras failed to capture. The gossip, the penalty, the disintegration of a guy who had already lost all, yet still had more to fall. Diddy was meant to appear at ease on that released video. It revealed the delusion, instead, reminding the world that freedom wasn't the next chapter in his life. That's the one that was deleted. The video of Diddy inside Fort Dix went viral more quickly than any other prison release in recent history. Millions of people watched it, shared it, slowed it down, and examined every second as if it were a trailer for a movie that no one had ever seen before in less than a day. It appears straightforward at first look. Wearing khaki, Diddy strolled serenely into the media library of the chapel, a man who seems to have come to terms with his fate. They read, worked, and gave the camera a small smile before vanishing down a lengthy hallway. However, that movie presented an entirely different picture to individuals who have actually experienced federal incarceration, because the public's perception of serenity was actually a sign of tiredness. You can see that if you freeze any frame of the video, the gray beard was thick and untrimmed near the jaw. Not a fashion statement, but a reflection of the passing of time in an area where few mirrors exist and barbers have months-long reservations. The slumped posture, inward tilted shoulders, and lax arms at his sides were caused by the strain of continuous observation rather than actual defeat. Even your posture becomes a means of self-defense while you're incarcerated. All of the gestures in that video, the slow nod, the courteous half smile, the look at the camera before leaving are not indicative of comfort. They are signs of survival. This is how a former Fort Dix prisoner who lived in the same building for over 2 years described it. You gain the ability to act calmly. You grin. You act normally because someone will test you if you appear overly irate or afraid. The survival face is that smile. To avoid being eaten alive by the area, you act as though everything is fine, with that quick, faint smile. The one that was in the news? It wasn't joy. It was a habit, a muscle reaction that has been transformed into armor after years of prominence. Something more profound was also made clear by the video, something that casual viewers missed. Diddy's hands are firmly tucked inside his sleeves as he leaves the chapel. The behavior is instantly recognizable to ex-offenders. We refer to it as the fold, an unconscious attempt to conceal fragility, prevent trembling, or project a smaller, less menacing image. Every movement has significance. In a world where a single glance might lead to bloodshed, the tempo comes next. Measured, slow, and under control. He has mastered the art of counting his steps. Because rhythm is survival in prison. You attract attention when you move too quickly. You appear fragile and move too slowly. There is a little exchange as he passes the other prisoner in the video, the one wheeling the black cart. And you notice a cadence that says, "I'm fine. Don't look too closely. Just closeness, nah." Eye contact, no handshake, no words. That's deliberate at a place like Fort Dix. Every partnership requires caution. Every recognition nod is dangerous. It appears unremarkable to an outside observer. It's silent coded communication for anyone within. The scene itself conveys a tale. The chapel library has long been referred to as the calm room, since it is the only area in Fort Dix where prisoners are allowed to wander around somewhat freely. Air conditioning occasionally works there, and religious literature coexists on shelves with worn paperbacks and vintage CDs. It's also one of the few locations where cameras don't follow you around all the time. The video was so controversial because of this. Its leakage from that area indicated that someone, either a staff member or another prisoner, took a calculated chance to remove it. Probably not for financial gain, but to demonstrate to the public that even famous prisoners face the same challenges as everyone else. The leak turned into a declaration. Now take a look at him. When the spotlight is removed, see what power looks like. Reactions on the internet were divided. Social media was inundated with sympathy from some admirers. He seemed calm. Others, particularly those familiar with prison culture, quickly saw through the facade. As one commenter put it, "He's finding himself." That's not peace. A user said that it's survival mode. It was broken down frame by frame in podcasts. Legal experts offered their opinions on whether it was morally acceptable to distribute the video at all. In a composed statement, Diddy's spokesperson described the footage as a private event that ought never to have been shared. In actuality, though it was too late, Diddy's arrest had become more significant than his case because of the clip. An inadvertent documentary about a guy learning to live without the privileges that formerly distinguished him. A cultural spectacle. The repercussions for Diddy himself went much beyond humiliation. He was under increased surveillance by the Bureau of Prisons. Guards kept a closer eye on him. Wary that his presence would draw unwelcome attention from the outside, other prisoners became colder. The irony was harsh for someone who had lived a lifetime in front of cameras. The thing that exposed them the most now was the camera. Here, however, notoriety kills you. According to an off-the-record statement made by one prison officer, when you've been famous your whole life, anonymity feels like punishment. That's what the video actually depicts. Not solace or approval, but the silent disintegration of a man who has lost the ability to distinguish between survival and performance. There is emotional deterioration in addition to physical weariness. The smile is a tactic, not an expression of friendliness. There is no calm in the silence. It's terror with a composed exterior. It depicts a man devoid of all illusions, going about his daily life in a society that is set up to obliterate identity. Even one as enormous as Diddy. However, the system benefits more the longer he remains, because it's not the walls that shatter you in places like Fort Dix. The waiting is the problem. It's the quiet in between strides. It's the grin you have to wear until it becomes genuine. Sean Diddy Combs, a former music magnate, and now inmate 63,928,054, has experienced the true meaning of helplessness. The man who once filled stadiums, founded empires, and had the power to control an entire society with a single post now spends his days in a 6XL obeying commands from people who don't give a damn about who he used to be. It's the kind of fall that destroys more than simply wealth or prestige. Identity is destroyed by it. Diddy represented authority for many years. He was in charge of his reputation, songs, company, and legacy. To maintain the illusion, every action was planned, every headline was handled, and every frame was created. The invincible businessman, however, there is no control within the Bureau of Prisons, no PR spin, no entourage, and no music to muffle the clamor. Your value isn't determined by celebrity or money here. Silence, compliance, and your ability to vanish are used to gauge it. MDC Brooklyn has been referred to as barbarous by judges. Lawyers have referred to it as lawless, and those who have lived there refer to it as such. Hell, a place where punishment goes beyond the letter of the law. A location that grinds people down instead than just holding them. Perhaps, however, that is what the released video actually demonstrated to us. A rare, unvarnished look at a guy who has ultimately lost everything but himself, not scandal or show. Just a name, a number, and a routine. No luxury, no stage lights, no entourage. More is conveyed by the quiet of those hallways than by any headline. It says, "This is what happens when power fades. And the only thing left is truth." Because behind those steel doors, even fame fades, egos vanish, masks fall. And what's left isn't Sean Combs, the mogul, the legend, the icon. It's just a man trying to survive the system he thought he could outrun. For Diddy, the real fight isn't for freedom anymore. It's for survival of the self. Every day behind those walls is a battle between who he was and who he's being forced to become. And the longer he stays, the thinner that line gets. That's the real price of power. Not losing what you own, but losing who you are when there's nothing left to own. But one question still lingers. The one no one has answered. If that footage was leaked, who leaked it? And what else are they hiding inside MDC? Because if this is what they let us see, imagine what they don't. In the end, it wasn't the sentence that broke him. It was the system that built him up, then swallowed him whole. Let us know your thoughts in comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like this video to support the channel. Subscribe to Holly Hype TV for the latest updates and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Until next time, peace out.